Just like Lantern, Jumpluff is so cute. How could you not love this thing? Oh, and it's also kind of a pain in the ass to deal with in GSC Unused. Jumpluff is a very unique and unexpectedly great Pokemon in GSC Unused. At first, it might seem fairly useless due to its extremely lacking offensive presence. And yeah, in that field, Jumpluff is fairly abysmal. Its attacking stats are pitiful, and its attacking move pool is very shallow too, so a vast majority of the time, it doesn't bother with attacking moves. Jumpluff remains a very viable Pokemon, however, due to its large supporting move pool, fantastic speed, and solid typing. Jumpluff is able to fulfill the role of a supporting Pokemon and check numerous setup sweepers. Jumpluff is one of the fastest Pokemon in the metagame, only being outsped by the uncommon Electrode and Crobat. It is faster than common Pokemon like Scyther, Electabuzz, Dodrio, Haunter, and Mr. Mime, and it's able to ruin most of them with Stun Spore paralysis. Jumpluff is an effective paralysis spreader with Stun Spore, which not only cripples Pokemon like Qwilfish, Scyther, and Gyarados, but also supports slower Pokemon like Curse Granbull and Bellydrum Quagsire. Stun Spore is absolutely essential on Jumpluff, because without it, offensive Pokemon can just freely come in on it. Encore is another mandatory move on Jumpluff, which allows it to check numerous setup sweepers in the metagame. Jumpluff is able to switch into Pokemon like Scyther and Pinsir and Encore them as they use Sword Stance. While Scyther can 2-hit KO Jumpluff on the switch, Jumpluff can sacrifice itself to remove the opponent's most dangerous offensive threat by using Stun Spore as Scyther KOs it. Scyther rarely wants to stay in as a result, which Jumpluff can capitalise on by using Synthesis as it switches out. Yeah, when a common counterplay to Scyther is to play Russian Roulette with Jumpluff, it's no wonder this mon's busted as heck. Anyway, Encore is just a great move in general. It can be used to lock Pokemon into rest, or to lock Pokemon into moves that won't affect Jumpluff's teammates, giving them a safe switch in. When Agility Pass teams were still allowed, Jumpluff was one of the most effective Pokemon against them, due to Encore, Stun Spore, and Jumpluff's speed. Another essential move on Jumpluff is Synthesis, which lets us stick around in games, especially when combined with Spike's immunity. Synthesis Jumpluff can be fairly annoying to KO, and annoying to switch into because of Sun Spore. For Jumpluff's last move, it decides between Leech Seed or Sleep Powder depending on the team. If Jumpluff is paired with Spikes, then Leech Seed can be fairly annoying to deal with, since opposing grass types are rare in GSC Underused, and they get ruined by Sun Spore anyway. It forces a lot of switches, and lets you get Jumpluff's teammates on the field more easily, on top of chipping down other Pokemon, especially bulky Rest Hawk users like Hypno or Slowbro. Leech Seed with Spikes is probably Jumpluff's best way of dealing damage. Yeah, that's kinda sad. On teams without Spikes though, Leech Seed is fairly useless, so Sleep Powder is preferred. Sleep Powder is good because, well, it's GSC Sleep. While Rest Hawk is very common in this tier, there are still numerous Pokemon that don't use Rest, so they get basically OHKO'd by Sleep Powder. It can make Pokemon like Scyther, Electabuzz, and Gyarados often snooze for more than 4 turns. It also stops Qwilfish users who think they can just spike up freely on Jumpluff. While Jumpluff's HP and defensive stats look fairly mediocre, they're actually better than one might think, due to how GSC lets you max out every Pokemon's stats. Jumpluff is fairly solid at switching into Pokemon like Mr. Mime and Haunter at least a few times. Jumpluff is also solid at switching into water types like Slowbro, Slowking, and Blastoise. It also destroys Grow Politoed thanks to Encore, Leech Seed, and Stun Spore. As mentioned earlier, Jumpluff is an immense pain for slower setup Pokemon like Pinsir and Sandslash, who can't damage it much without boosting. Outside of Piloswine, Ice-type moves are fairly uncommon in GSC Underused, since Pokemon like Nidoqueen and Electabuzz rarely use them anymore. Speaking of Nidoqueen, Jumpluff is a fairly decent check to it, hovering over Earthquake, not being too threatened by Fire Blast, and threatening Nidoqueen with Paralysis. If Jumpluff switches into an Earthquake from Nidoqueen, then it can just freely Encore to force it out. Having a ground immunity is just incredibly useful in this tier, because of all the hidden power grounds there are. Jumpluff's typing also grants it an immensely useful spikes immunity, which greatly increases its longevity and ability to switch in. Jumpluff took many years to be noticed in GC or Neos. It didn't start being used until around 2018, and keep in mind, GCU has been played since like 2005. That's more than a decade of the tier being played for people to start realising this thing was good. You can see this on the viability ranking thread, because Jumpluff was first tiered as C. C is for super niche Pokemon that are generally bad, which is shit like Sudda Woulda won Persian in the current VR. When Jumpluff was discovered though, it took off and quickly became a GCRDO staple. Now while Jumpluff is pretty solid, it has quite a few issues. If Jumpluff is ever paralysed, then it's pretty much useless, because its viability largely comes from its speed. Remember when I mentioned Jumpluff being decent versus Mr. Mime, Haunter and Nidoqueen? Yeah, well, they often use Thunder, and they often click it on the switch to try ruin Jumpluff. Other status inflictions, like Poison, are similarly bad for Jumpluff. Jumpluff is among the most passive Pokemon in the metagame, which means it invites in dangerous Pokemon such as Piloswine and Resthawk Granbull. Letting in Piloswine is especially bad because of how few checks it has. This also makes Jumpluff fairly useless against bulky teams who can just switch around and waste its utility. Because of its passivity, Jumpluff can be very difficult to fit on teams. Teams with Jumpluff often need to account for all the threats it lets in, including Granbull, Piloswine and Resthawk variants of Mr. Mime. While Jumpluff's bulk isn't horrible, it's still not great at taking repeated attacks, which can force it to burn through Synthesis's APP rather quickly. In the end though, Jumpluff isn't a Pokemon for every team, but has a unique and valuable niche in GC or Neos that keep it a strong Pokemon in today's metagame. Jumpluff is amazing. It's a staple on Lantern Pilot too, I forgot to mention that, oops.